Okay, so in today's session, we are going to explore the sense of doership, the sense of being an independent, autonomous agent in control, and uh, an entity having free will. And we will do that in like the session will have two parts. The first one will be more of a contemplation. So it's going to be still in a meditative uh, state, but it's going to be more conceptual. And then in the second part, we are going to explore our immediate experience of the sense of being a controller, a doer. Um, and yeah, so to begin with, you can just settle into a comfortable pose and relax into this moment. Maybe take a few slower, deeper breaths. You can see if a sigh wants to come up and release some tension through that. You can just feel the movement of the breath in your whole body with a gentle awareness. And then to begin our contemplation, I want to ask you to bring up a scenario, something that happened in your life where you feel a sense of blame towards another person, a sense of blame or resentment towards somebody. That could be someone who's close to you, um, or it could also be somebody you don't even know personally. So just get into contact with this feeling of blaming this other person, resenting what they're doing or have been doing to you. Maybe they caused some pain to you in some way, and there's a feeling of blame. And next, I um, I want to ask you to bring up something, a situation, a memory, or an experience that you had where you feel a sense of guilt or shame. And it can be because of something that you did. Maybe you caused pain to somebody else, or you did something that you perceived as a failure or something that was very embarrassing, or some quality of yourself that you feel shame about. And just get in touch with how that feels to either feel guilt, shame. And then next, I would like you to bring up something that you feel proud about, something that is either something you did that you feel proud about, or an ability that you have, a quality that you have, and get into contact with this feeling of pride or even arrogance, or the feeling of I am good, I am worthy because of this thing that I did or this quality that I have. Okay, and you can let go of that. And these feelings of blame, resentment, guilt, shame, pride, arrogance, maybe you can see that they are quite directly based on a deeper assumption that you are in control of your actions. You are there's a sense of there's something I did that I was responsible for, was an expression of my free will. It might not be a conceptual belief, but if this feeling is there, it points to a deeper belief, or that the other person is a controller, a doer who is in control of their life, of their actions, of their behavior. And that is the feeling of blame and the feeling of pride, the feeling of being good because of something that you did or the quality that you have. It's also based on that it's your doing. You're kind of in some way responsible for that. And so these feelings where like two of those feelings are very obviously suffering. With the pride part, we can talk about in which sense that could be suffering. But so that's just the baseline of this exploration, is that this belief in personal doership and being an autonomous entity with control over your actions, over your life, and seeing other people the same way is a cause for suffering. And now we want to explore if this belief is accurate or in line with your actual experience and in line with how life unfolds. And in this first part of this which is more a contemplation, we just are going to look at how you as a physical and psychological being came into existence and developed and arrived at this point, and see if we can find any choice or free will in that process. And so we could say that innumerable prior causes and conditions led to, at some moment, a sperm and an egg cell met and an embryo started growing, which was not your control, under your control that happened. And there was a natural process that started, cells dividing, organs developing, a brain developing, all on itself, all by itself. And there's a genetic blueprint that not only organized how this growth happened, but organized like the specific kind of human being that was growing there. And this DNA, this genetic blueprint, is not something that you choose. And also from the beginning and during this process of growth of the embryo in the womb, there were external circumstances that influenced how this being developed. Your mother's nutrition, the chemicals in her blood, her stress levels, sounds from the circumstances, from the surroundings, all of those left imprints in the developing body, mind, organism. shaped how the nervous system developed. And from the moment you were born, this same process of growth continued, um, and circumstances, influences from the outside also contributed to how this being developed. And my suggestion is that there are only these two factors that are at play here. There was at no point another factor that came in to determine this how this being then continued to grow and to develop. So there were circumstances you were born into. You didn't choose your parents. You were not in control of the caregiving style of your parents, if they were very attentive, or if there was some neglect happening there. Like those were influences from the outside that then continued how the nervous system developed, how emotional regulation was learned, and the baby absorbed language, a language that it didn't choose, and it was then growing up to be in a certain environment. There's a culture in which you grew up. There are like religious, uh, political, spiritual beliefs that your parents held and that maybe shaped the child from an early age. And the way that you responded to all these influences was defined by the structure that was put in place by the genetic blueprint, by the biological makeup. And this this continued later in life, when you didn't choose the school that you went to, and you didn't choose what interested you and what didn't. That was an effect of your conditioning and your genetics. And in adolescence, the hormonal changes that happened, or which subculture you felt drawn towards, or which music you liked, that was all something that just developed out of this personality that was just an organic process of growth. And the culture, the social class you were born into was not something that you choose. Your likes and dislikes also naturally developed. And when you they changed, there was no control over you changing them. In So you didn't choose which sources of information you considered to be reliable, what sounded, what attracted you there, and the worldview that developed out of consuming this kind of information was not under your control. And then in your later, when you growing up, your relationships, the people you felt attracted to, was just an output of the system. It's not something that you choose. And similar, in your career was conditioned by talents that you didn't give yourself, and by opportunities that you didn't arrange, and impulses and fears that appeared in your mind, stemming from the underlying structure that just naturally grew. And also when there were like things like you working hard at something, or there was a drive to persist, that was in place, that was something that happened, is caused by a mix of genetics and upbringing and circumstances. And yeah, also your deepest belief, or your spiritual search, your interest in meditation, everything that brought you here to this moment was an interplay between your biological makeup, which you had no control over, and the circumstances that you also didn't control. So I invite you to just take a moment to yeah, feel into that and appreciate that, like these innumerable circumstances that in every moment of life developing are new information that enter the system, and all these informations are filtered and processed according to the structure that is in place, that is something that grew without a personal controller of how this structure developed. And maybe get a sense for, like, that's the same for everybody. And now we can shift gears into the more meditative exploration of your direct experience of a sense of control and free will. And I would say that as so from my perspective, there are three main factors that contribute to this sense of there being free will, or there being a controller, even if there might be an appreciation of an understanding that it actually unfolds more in a way of a natural growth. And of course, we can discuss this later. I'm presenting this year, I'm presenting it in this way, but I'm happy to go into a discussion afterwards. But I would say that these three areas that really that our sense of control and free will really rests on is, one, the sense of being able to control our thoughts, the sense of I am the thinker, and I can like make decisions in my thoughts and then follow through on them. And secondly, the sense of being able to move the body, this feeling of I have control over moving my body. And thirdly, which is a little more subtle, the sense of controlling the movement of attention. And so to begin with, I would like to invite you to explore this sense of being able to control thoughts in any way. And you can just take a little time to observe if there's any mental activity happening right now. And just try to pay close attention to where thoughts are actually coming from. Is there any source of thoughts that you can see, perceive in your own direct experience? Or are they simply appearing? And do you know which thought is going to come next? Is there even the slightest idea of what you're going to think next? And if there is a thought that says, I'm probably going to think about X next, and then you think about X, did you know that this thought, I'm going to think about X next, was going to appear? Or was that just a spontaneous occurrence? Now try to think really deliberately, like turn up the sense of I am, I am thinking, I am doing this. And be curious about, is there really anything changing about where thoughts are coming from, or you having any insight in what's going to appear next? Or is it more that maybe the tone of voice of the mental voice changes, or maybe something in your somatic experience changes as well, that gives a greater sense of control? So to choose thoughts, you would have to see the thoughts before they're there, and then decide, this is the thought I want to think. So is that scenario how it plays out in your mind? That you can choose from a set of thoughts that have not been thought yet, and then decide, this is the one I want to bring into consciousness? Or is it always actually a surprise what's appearing next? So you can think of a number between 1 and 10. Did you know what number would appear before it appeared? And also notice that you were thinking of a number between 1 and 10 because of a circumstance, because of a prompt that came from the outside, over which you had no control. And then, if your experience is anything like mine, a number just appeared. And maybe there is another thought that says, I did that. Now, think of yourself where, when there's an image that appeared, did you design that image, like the angle of the image of you, or the this exact image, um, the colors, the lighting? Did you go into like a consciousness studio and painted this image, or was it just appearing? Was it just there? And if you don't see images in your mind, if you think about yourself in um, like in verbal thought, did you compose those sentences? or whether just appearing. So next, we can explore the sense of being able to move the body, being in control of movement of the body. And for that, I want you to feel into your right hand. And at some point, I want you to lift your hand and pay very close attention to the moment when you apparently choose to lift the hand. How does this choice happen? And you can do that a couple of times and see if you can really see how this choice happens, or if it's something that is not, it's not something you have any insight into. You can also lift either the left or the right hand and see how that choice comes about, whether you choose to lift the left or the right hand. Do you really know which hand is going to lift before it happens? Maybe there is an impulse before the hand lifts, but are you in control of that impulse, or is that something that just appears? Now, there are other instances where impulses appear, but the hand is not lifting. Maybe there are thoughts saying, now I'm going to lift this hand. But is there any direct connection you can observe between this thought and the lifting of the hand? Or are these just two happenings that coincide without any causal connection? So now we can explore a little bit more complex movement. You can just take one hand and wave it, move it, stretch the fingers, make a fist. Um, just let that hand move and pay close attention to how are you doing that? How is that actually happening? And also notice that there's a prompt from the circumstances that is prompting you to do this movement now. And there is your structure that is agreeing to doing that now. So without either of those, this movement would not happen. But feel into the immediate experience of the hand moving. Feel all the muscles involved, all the little tiny muscles that move the fingers independently of each other, that allow the hand to turn, muscles that go up into your arm. Do you have any any insight into how to control all of those muscles? Or is that a process that is as opaque to you as the process of beating your heart or digesting food? Growing your hair? And then at some point you can stop the movement and see, how does this decision happen to stop? Okay, and lastly, we can observe the movement of attention. Like, this is something I would say generally comes up more for if you're exploring meditation more deeply, and then there might be the sense of, yeah, the one thing that I'm in control of is moving my attention around. So put your attention on the sensations of your right foot and notice there's a prompt from the environment and maybe a reaction. Do you have any insight in how this process is happening of paying attention to the sensations in your right foot? Or is it just appearing? And you can move your attention up your leg. Does it feel like you're somewhere located somewhere in the head or the chest? That the attention is almost like a ray that is radiating out from this place towards that area in your body. And is that something that is pointing to reality in your actual experience, or is that a thought image, mental overlay, an interpretation of just two independently existing clusters of sensation that have no causal relationship? We can experiment a bit with your attention, letting it become wide open and spacious, narrowing it down, moving it around in different ways, and see if there's really a doer involved in controlling this movement of attention, or if it's actually just experience shape shifting all on its own, with maybe a mental narrative that describes I'm doing that, or images of the body, the face, the head that suggests a center of control there. Like, how are you doing any of this? How are you even aware? How do you do that? How do you hear these words, hear these sounds, and translate them into words that have a meaning and that then seem to prompt your body or your attention to move in certain ways? How are you sensing sensations? Is there anything that you can control, that you can switch on and off? Could it be that all of this, your whole life, the whole of life, is just one unfolding without any controlling entities anywhere? So, and as we're coming towards the end of our exploration, I would like you to return to those situations you caught up in the beginning, the situation of blame or resentment, the situation of guilt and shame, the situation of pride, and feel into each one of those for a moment and see if anything changed there. Okay, when you're ready, you can come out of the meditation in your own time and we can debrief together.